Hi, I'm Mariel,
Hi, I'm Julia.
and welcome to eLearning Unlocked. This is our podcast for people working in e-learning, right? E-learning professionals.
For instructional designers or for people who are interested in e-learning and just want to learn something more about this particular area.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about learning culture, kind of from compliance to connection. So really, how can you establish a good learning culture? How can you make sure people actually connect with it? So we're going to cover some of those core topics today.
Yes, definitely. And I think our core question would be, can training actually build connection within the company and to create this kind of like company culture?
Yes.
Because of course, compliance training is something that it's, let's say, quite obvious as a must-have in certain places. So just to really think of whether it's actually building the connection and if the company culture really benefits from that, I would say.
Yeah. So really, can we go beyond compliance training, basically, because that is just the core legal basis, but really, how can we use it to reinforce company values, encourage openness in the company, encourage learning, connection, and really show the company also has an interest in investing in people? I guess that's really key.
Yes, definitely. And, just maybe to start from the basics, if you think of compliance, what comes to your mind at first,
Yeah. I think for me personally, I don't have a very positive connotation when I think about compliance training. I think, if you're only doing compliance training within your company, there's definitely an opportunity to do a lot more, just because compliance training is kind of the boring part of the education world. I think for me personally, I don't have the best connotation with it, just because it feels like that's the mandatory part. It's often not the most creative part. It's often not the most insightful or even applicable on the day-to-day work floor. So I think it's really nice when companies offer different types of trainings as well.
Yes, definitely. For me, the same. So I'm just nodding because I totally agree with you. Like if you think of compliance, you think of boring, something that you need to do, it's necessary, etc.
You want to kind of tick it off, right?
Exactly. But if you really, try to look at it from, let's say, content creator perspective, you can still take the most out of this compliance training, starting with renaming it, perhaps. Maybe that's the first way to approach it, but just to really highlight what you can get out of compliance training aside from those, let's say, mandatory tick boxes that you need to cover, because there's so much, as you mentioned at the beginning, right? You can really introduce company values, what are the key priorities that are important when delivering a certain product or a certain experience. And really, let's say, talk about the company culture as well, whether it's, about friendliness, openness, what are the different approaches for the company towards, inclusivity, what are the, let's say, daily go-tos, there's really a lot that you can cover in a compliance training that is not part of this kind of like boring must-have.
I think this is also why we often don't recommend off-the-shelf learning in general. I think when you really push a lot of off-the-shelf learning onto your employees, often it's not adapted to your company situation, to your situation of your employee. It's not necessarily relevant 100%, and so they might be wasting their time with 20-30% of the content at least. They're going to feel this sort of lack of connection to the company, lack of connection to your brand. So I think we don't love off-the-shelf content. We really do recommend, really either tailoring it to your company or having it really be built by your company directly, so that you really do have the benefit of having your employees really engage with content that is also resonating constantly, your company brand, your company culture, and your values as an institution. I think this is really important.
Yes, definitely. I think it's a good starting point for discussing how to move from compliance to connection.
Yes,
Yes,
so exactly.
A good one.
So how can we work to really building this culture and this connection? How can we really move to training that builds that?
Yeah, so you already, let's say, started mentioning that it's really important to highlight company values and even those branding inputs here and there. Just really feel that it's part of the company and that also the company sort of invests in people. I think it's a good reflection. if you think of it. Because if you take off-the-shelf content, of course, it's quicker. Of course, it's in a way, approachable and adaptable, of course. But in the end, you really want your employees to learn out of it about the company, about the daily work, etc., etc. So it's
and we really can, I think, take compliance to connection. So even a compliance course, there's this one example that we've worked with a German company where we really branded their compliance training, and they were actually blown away by the positive feedback that they got on their compliance training, because they really went from having a very, I want to say, a little bit stuffy, very standardized compliance training to having a very unique to their culture, uniquely branded compliance training that was much more engaging, much more fun, and where we tried to incorporate their company culture a lot more. And they really saw very positive feedback. So even when it comes to still the compliance topics, you can make them engaging, you can make them fun, and that you can make them well branded so they really resonate.
Exactly. So those little tweaks here and there could really already be a quick fix that you can approach, right? Because of course you don't have to rethink the whole concept of compliance training. You don't have to create it from scratch and really fully adjust it to your company. Of course, depending on the resources, you're not always, let's say.
It was quite a simple thing we did. It was quite a simple turnaround.
Exactly. So sometimes, the simplest solutions work best. So,
Yeah, they say, right, keep it simple. And I think here that really applies. So another very typical example where we can really build a cultural moment is the onboarding. I think too often the onboarding is like a data dump. It's like, hi, welcome to our company. Here's all these things that you need to know, all these files you can look at, and it's kind of becomes this data dump of like, let's just give them everything. And that kind of sometimes hurts, I think, the onboarding process more than anything. So how can we make that a little bit better as well?
Yeah, that's a very, very good point, because it's actually something that can build an immediate connection to the company, to your new colleagues at the company. So definitely like a module approach, role-specific approach would be already an immediate solution to this kind of like info dump that you just mentioned.
More human, right? Where you feel like actually seen as a person.
Exactly. It's definitely important to highlight that you really don't overwhelm users with 10-pager, whatever. You just really focus on, for example, introducing first intro document on the company culture, but then you really have a peer, shadowing in a way, just to see role-specific details about your new role that you're being onboarded to, and just try to personalize it to be, let's say, a bit more human approachable. And a module approach is something that I'm always, let's say, eager to promote. Which is that you don't really just put, 1 hour, 2 hour onboarding training and that's it. You just drop it. But then you really, introduce the onboarding step by step. And then it makes them a bit more excited as well about the company, right? About joining. I don't know what you think.
No, absolutely. And I think totally agree. And it really goes back to, you don't need to invest huge amounts of resources, but you can also get creative with the onboarding moments. I know of a company that actually kind of simulated even almost like a hangout. So they recorded a Hangouts team call, and they kind of simulated that this person was joining this call, and they kind of allowed different people and different roles to introduce some things about the company. I think that was a really fun idea. So it's really just about how can you let the personality of your company, your brand shine through, and how can you make it a little bit of an enjoyable moment for that person, because it's their first day, their first week. And I think if we only share very stuffy material, it shows a sort of negative image of the first week. And I know a lot of people that are happy now, but that had terrible first weeks at their company. So if we can avoid that, it just allows you to really retain employees so much better. I mean, some say that even a really good onboarding can increase employee retention on a 3-year span by like almost 70%. So the results can be really there. So it's a small investment of time and effort just to make it go that much longer.
Yeah, that's definitely a highlight here. Then I think the next point to cover here would be to focus on personalization that we just
Yes.
mentioned before, because it's really important. We already, tackled a bit off-the-shelf content and info dump, no matter on the role specific details. But I believe personalization, when you're joining the company, but also later on, is super important.
It's like the magic word.
Exactly. So I think that one size fits all doesn't work here. I don't know what you think. I don't know.
No, there's very rare cases in which one size fits all works. And I think definitely thinking a bit about the employee background, a retail employee versus an HQ employee is going to have a very different first week. So we need to keep that in mind as well with their e-learning trajectory throughout, right?
Yes, definitely. And of course, also considering all the different factors that matter, right? So it may be a specific time that they're joining in the company, right? So you also need to understand and personalize the experience to that small detail, right? Because you can imagine that, I don't know, the company just created a new department, right? So it's completely a fresh start in a way. And that particular person may be just being introduced to the new concept, new, let's say, exploration phase as well. So the onboarding experience should be a bit different than to, I don't know, financial or HR departments that are quite static and quite standard in a way over a few years now. So this might be a good way to, let's say, approach those unusual situations. I think just to maybe summarize this part from my side would be to mention that you always need to look at onboarding as a personalized experience, right? Because each people that is coming into the company, or even, let's say, refreshing knowledge about the company after a few years, they may be, simply a different person, right? We're all humans, so it's important.
Absolutely. No, it's really important. And I think it's easier said than done, but to meet people where they are is so key, because if you don't meet people where they are in their knowledge journey and in their professional journey, if they're part of a new store opening or they're part of an existing team that just needs a refresher on the latest products, I think this is very, very key, because then you can really keep it quite simple, but really make sure you get the value, across that they need to learn at that moment.
Exactly. And I think it gets back to the part that we mentioned before. So it may be a little effort, let's say, to investigate that at first, but in the end, the outcomes will be tremendous.
Yes, absolutely. And we see that a lot with our clients as well, that if they push a certain product knowledge or they push a certain, effective course, that they actually see direct impacts on sales. Sometimes they do an in-person activation or an online activation, but that really, really drives the business even. So you really will see results as well on a business level.
Yeah, definitely. So as you could already see, and here, we covered a few points that really matter if we are talking about compliance and connecting people later on. So I believe we could really use learning to connect people. It's like to really start from that your aim of introducing learning, no matter on the specific topic about the company, it's to connect people, to introduce the company to them in a way that they build this engagement and connection. I think this could be like a driver for it.
Yeah, 100%. And training is culture. So you really have to make it count and really have to give the kind of training that your company can be proud of as well and stand behind. And like you said, really use learning to connect people and not just check the boxes. Because then I think we all feel it. If it just check the box, it will not really leave an impact.
Yeah, it won't resonate. That's for sure.
We hope you enjoyed today's podcast, that it was useful for you, that you felt there were some good takeaways. And please listen again and come back.
Yes, thanks a lot for listening. We hope the concepts we covered were interesting, and we invite you to listen in for more.